Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Business Essentials podcast. I'm your host, Veronika, and welcome to 2022. How many of you have set a resolution to eat better or lose weight? Probably most of you, or that tends to be one of the most common resolutions that people make. And as such, today we're going to be speaking with registered dietitian Adrianne Delgado. She's going to be talking to us about how to shift our mindset about food and about eating so that we can be successful as we set those resolutions and accomplish those goals in 2022. I had the pleasure of speaking with Adrianne before this recording, and I love her approach to nutrition. I can't wait to bring her on, so stick around, and I'll be back right after this.
Tony Robbins once said, "No matter how many mistakes you make or how slow you progress, you are still way ahead of everyone who isn't trying." This is the Biz Essentials. You want to grow, get ahead, keep the spark. Here you'll get valuable insights and empowerment to grow personally and professionally. Isn't it about time you turn your dreams into successful passion projects? Learn how to be productive, be successful, be joyful, and more importantly, be yourself. The B Essentials. This is the Biz Essentials. And this is your host, Veronika of Veronika Ventures.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Adrianne. Adrianne, I'm so excited that you're here because as we're closing out 2021 and coming into 2022, so many of us have those lofty goals, not only in the business world, but also on a personal level of maybe losing that COVID weight or that holiday weight. So I would love it for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm a registered dietitian, so my job is to counsel people, whether it be for weight management. That's probably the bulk of my client base, but I also do what we call medical nutrition therapy, which is basically helping people, whether they have, maybe it's high cholesterol or diabetes or an autoimmune disease, and really helping them find which foods feel best in their body to either create better blood work or better energy, just feeling their best so they can do all the things that they want to do throughout the day. And then we also do things like sports nutrition and eating disorders. I do have an outpatient practice that I own and operate along with 10 other dietitians on our staff. We recently just opened up our second location. So we have a lot going on, but we're changing lives, we're helping the community, and I'm just so thrilled to be a part of it.
That sounds amazing. And congratulations on that new office.
Thank you. Yes, it's a lot of work, but it's so much fun.
I bet. It's fabulous when you get to do something that you're really passionate about. As we're talking about weight loss and nutrition, it sounds like you do quite a bit on a very big scope. I know a lot of people who come into the new year and want to lose weight. What are some things that we can do to set ourselves up on the right path when it comes to nutrition and losing weight?
So one of the biggest things that I talk to clients about is figuring out your way, right? We hear this so many times, like, you just got to figure out what works best for you. And that's where clients come to me and they're like, I don't know. Like, tell me what works for me. I feel like I've tried everything. I've done paleo, I've done keto, I've done intermittent fasting. I don't know what is best for me. So you tell me what is best for me. And so what I'll simply just give them a couple different tips, and I'll tell them how you know you found your way is if what you're doing can fit these three criteria. Number one is, can you see yourself doing this 5 years from now? So often we pick plans that are super restrictive. They feel ultra punishing because we think that's the only way we're going to be successful. And I have to remind them that nutrition is a long game. It's not a sprint. So many of us think, I'm going to do something really, really hard, and I'm going to lose all the weight, and then I'll be able to eat whatever I want, because then I'll be in maintenance. And I have to teach people that there is no weight loss plan and a separate maintenance plan. In our head, that's what we think it's supposed to be like because that's what we've been taught. But that's not actually true. Whatever gets you there keeps you there. So you have to make sure that if you want long-term results, you can see yourself doing these things over and over and over again. If you're not willing to make these changes 5 years from now because it feels too restrictive or it's not even possible for you to sustain it, then you're not going to be able to maintain the loss. And most of us, when we go into weight loss, we're not thinking, oh, I want to lose weight for just 3 months and then I'll gain it all back. We want to lose weight and keep it off and never have to worry about it again. If that is your goal, then we want to make sure that whatever you're doing to lose the weight is what you're going to be able to do to maintain that weight loss. Asking yourself, am I willing to do the same thing 5 years from now, is really, really important because it'll show you, yeah, I can see myself doing this. Then you know you're on the way to finding your path. So that's number one. Number two is, do you like it? We kind of forget about this piece because I'm willing to do whatever it takes. But if we hate something, if we literally hate the foods we're eating, we're miserable all the time, we're starving, we're just nasty people because we're so hungry all the time because we're super restrictive, we're not going to stick with it. It goes back to number one. If you can't stick with it, then you don't have your plan. I really think it's important to like what you're doing because the quickest way to quit something is to do something you hate. And again, nutrition is a long game. So if you want the results, you have to consistently show up for yourself. How you stay motivated is by doing something you enjoy because then you don't mind showing up. But if you hate it, dread it, loathe it, you're going to look for every opportunity to quit. Usually motivation runs out by day 3 or 4. And so we're not even getting through the first week of our resolutions before we're giving up. Part of my job is to teach people how to be motivated, right? They come to me for motivation. Well, in my practice, I take health insurance. So health insurance dictates how many times they get to see me. For some people, it's unlimited. For some people, it's 3 visits a year or 6 visits a year, 10 visits, depending on their plan. If the only time they're going to be motivated is when they see me, that's a lot of pressure because I don't know if I'm going to see them for the next week or 2, right? Depending on how often they're coming. So I have to teach them how to motivate themselves so they can continue to show up for themselves every day. And part of that process is figuring out a plan that you actually enjoy and that you want to show up for versus only being motivated 3 or 4 times a year when I get to talk to my dietitian. Right. It doesn't work that way. The third piece, which is super important, is it working? You may be able to see yourself doing something 5 years from now. You may like what you're doing, but if it's not getting you results, then we have to pivot. Part of this process is evaluating. I like to evaluate using non-scale victories. I don't like the scale to be the only measure of success because sometimes you do all the right things. You eat the right foods in the right amounts. You drink your water, you exercise, you manage your stress, you get enough sleep. Like you're doing all the things and then the scale won't move. Right? We've all had those moments where but I did everything I was supposed to do. And then we panic because we think what we're doing isn't working. And then we quit because we're like, well, why would I do all these things if I'm not getting the results? And so we really have to focus on what are our measures for success. Because if you do have more energy and you're sleeping better and more mental clarity in your job, you feel stronger, you're able to keep up with your kids and do all the things, then what you're doing is working. It just means that the scale didn't move that week. Not that anything went wrong, it just means the scale didn't move. So part of staying motivated, especially for these big goals, is figuring out how do we use other forms of victory, specifically non-scale victories, to keep us engaged so that we stay in the game and we do what we need to do to get the results. That was a very long-winded answer.
No, but I love it because it's true. And I've been there many, many times. I don't know if you know this, but before I was this weight, I topped out at over 300 pounds. And so I've been there many times. I was like a chronic dieter from like the age of 9. And maybe if I would have had the criteria, it would have been okay. But usually it was crazy things like the cabbage soup diet, or, like eating cottage cheese like 3 times a day, which it was literally like, oh, I can't take this.
Right. So then that's not your diet, but yet you told yourself, this is what I have to do, but then you couldn't maintain it.
Right, exactly. That lasted, like the 3 days it was supposed to last, and then I got all the weight back and then some. While we're talking about having those non-scale victories, one of those being like having more energy, being able to sleep better. Are there certain foods that we could steer ourselves towards that would help us have more energy and be more productive and clear-headed while we're doing our work?
So, one thing that I like to teach is the blend of carbohydrates and proteins all day long. And so, one of
Mm.
those things is complex carbohydrates. For so many of us, we fear carbs because we villainize them. Carbs are the enemy, carbs are terrible. But that's not fair because not all carbs are created equal. So, when we think of carbs, I want you to think of them in terms of complex and simple. Complex carbs have fiber in them. Fiber's a really good thing. It keeps you regular. It regulates your blood sugar. It lowers your cholesterol. It helps you feel full. When you hear fiber, I want you to think long and strong. All right. So it gives you energy, but more than energy, it gives you long sustaining energy. Simple carbs are things like sugar, like what you would find in beverages, candy, baked goods, those easy, quick convenience foods that are just so easy to grab. We know they're not good for us, but they get the job done so quickly, we end up gravitating towards them anyway. Those are the
Right.
ones that are going to spike your sugars. You're going to get that insulin response, and then you're going to crash. And so those types of carbs, obviously, we want to minimize. The complex carbs are the ones we want to go towards. So things like your whole grain, if your body does well on grains, beans, nuts, seeds, obviously all your fruits and vegetables. Those are ideally what should be the bulk of our diet. I recently have been giving out a challenge to my clients to eat 30 different plants every week because number one, it speaks variety so we don't get bored, but a more diversified diet is good for our gut health. And so I think it's a fabulous way to just challenge people to seek out more plants in their diet and not necessarily eat the convenience foods that are just so easy to grab. So complex carbs, that fiber, that long and strong for sufficient long lasting energy, and that in combination with some protein. Protein also helps you feel fuller longer. So most people find they feel their best when they combine those two things together.
Awesome. So I'm trying to think what would be a good example of like maybe like a meal or a snack that would include a good balance of carbs and protein?
If you're looking at just like a specific food, like edamame is really good for that because it's high in protein and fiber. But even pairing things together. So if you wanted to do some veggies and a hard boiled egg, because your hard boiled egg would be protein and your veggies would be your fiber, complex carbs. Even a piece of like wasa cracker with avocado on it. Well, I'll go back to egg because that's just an easy thing that I tend to grab the most often. But you could do a trail mix with nuts and dried fruit, or you can do a cheese stick for your protein, and you can pair that with an orange or a clementine or a pear or an apple. Those are what I would think of more as snack ideas for meals, like salad with chickpeas on it and grilled chicken. It could be a whole grain sandwich with fresh turkey breast on it. I'm trying to think of like simple things. Cottage cheese. I know you said you're not a fan. I do enjoy it. So a lot of times I'll do cottage cheese as my protein and I'll do berries with a little bit of granola on top. Those are some of my quick, easy, get the job done so I can keep going with my day. But they're very long lasting where I feel good. I don't run out of energy, but it provides what I need so I can get to my next meal.
That sounds great, actually. You're making me hungry as we were talking. One of the things that I struggle with now that I'm at this weight is knowing when to eat and what to eat. So we've talked a little bit about what to eat. My biggest downfall is that I'll kind of forget to eat all day. And so then I'll eat a bunch right before we go to bed, which I know is not ideal. Is there like a structure that we should follow when it comes to when to eat?
I'm a big fan of what I call proactive eating. So it's a little bit different than what the majority of people are doing. What we do is what you kind of described as reactive eating. So I forgot to eat all day because I was busy, distracted, whether that was intentional or unintentional. It's easy to do, especially if you have a job during the daytime hours. It's easy to forget to eat because you're so caught up in what you're doing. Or for some of us, I know what I ate last night, so I need to be good today, and I'll put good in air quotes. And so I'll just restrict my intake all day long so that I don't overeat calories. But then the problem is our hunger finally catches up with us and we end up eating everything from like 3 o'clock on until we go to bed. That's not usually the time where we're our most active. So when I talk about proactive eating, it's eating for your anticipated activity. The majority of us are the most active during the daytime hours. Even if you're not physically moving around, mentally, how much energy are you requiring to do your job and to do it well? For some of us, we have really intense, stressful positions, and it requires a lot of focus. That burns calories. And so when you are the most active, whether it's physically or mentally active or a combination of the two, that's when we need to eat. A lot of us, we try to not eat all day when we're the most active. And then when we're sedentary, then we dump all the food in our system. So it's like driving a car. Like if you want to drive across the country, you fill up your car with gas and then drive. You don't drive across the country and then once you've parked your car, then fill it up with gas so it can sit in the garage all night. But that's exactly what we do. And our bodies are not really designed to digest and absorb nutrients at the end of the day. Like our bodies have already moved on to second shift. Like we need to go into cellular repair, getting ready for the next day. Our bodies aren't really looking to do overtime and extra work in digestion, especially if we're not going to be active, because there's no reason for all those calories. But the number one reason why people overeat at night is mostly because they're undereating during the day. In their head, they're thinking, oh, well, I just won't eat at night. That's my problem. So now you're not eating all day and you're not eating at night. How long do you think that's going to last? Can you see yourself doing that 5 years from now?
And it's funny because as soon as I said I keep forgetting to eat, like old me would have slapped myself right now. It's like, who forgets to eat? But I have done the whole restrictive, like I'm not going to eat because once I start eating, I won't be able to stop. So I'm just going to wait and not eat until I absolutely have to. So it's good to know that I'm not alone in that plight.
No. A lot of people do it. It can either be intentional or unintentional. I know what I ate last night, so I got to be better today. And so I'll just be super restrictive, but then you're starving. And then you eat everything and then you get frustrated with yourself. Why can't I be more disciplined? It's not a discipline issue, it's a blood sugar issue. If you're not eating anything and you're active, you're going to be hungry. It's just how it works. So a lot of times people will tell me too, well, I'm not hungry in the morning. Well, sometimes that reason is because they overate at night. And because their body didn't move and didn't have any need to burn those calories, it just kind of sat there. And so then you wake up and you still feel like, ugh, right? We have that kind of not a hungover feeling, but it's just that blah, like, oh, I still feel great. Of course you don't want to eat, right? But then you start the whole cycle all over again of not eating during the day, eating all your calories at night. And then we wonder why the scale continues to creep up and why we don't feel good and why we're not focused for our day. So if we want to feel good for our day, we got to eat.
Yeah, that's totally me. I do that so much. For those of us who are stuck in that cycle, is there anything other than, just do it to help us kind of break the cycle?
I would just say instead of your first meal being around lunchtime, maybe just back it up a few hours and try to eat something small at 10 o'clock. For me personally, I like to eat about every 3 to 4 hours. That just feels good to me. I like to eat about 4 times a day. So I do like a breakfast, a lunch, a snack, and dinner. For my body, that's what feels good to me. That may feel good to you, or it may not. You may like to eat 3 times, you may like to eat 6 times. Again, no right or wrong way. It's what works for you. I would just say start to back up your meals a little bit if you tend to wait to eat. Just see how you feel if you have something small at 10, and then maybe you have something around 1 or 2, and if you have dinner around 6 or 7, and then drink some water at night, and then see if you notice that you're hungrier at the beginning of the day. If you are, that's great. And then you start to move that window. Instead of having all your calories between noon and 11 p.m., you slowly start to shift that time frame to maybe you're eating more like 7 to 8. Like I don't like to make hard rules about intermittent fasting because there's always going to be an opportunity for why you can't follow the rule. So I don't like to make rules that I know I'm going to break. For me, sometimes I work till 8 o'clock at night. So to tell myself I can't eat anything after 7 doesn't even make sense because sometimes that's my first opportunity to eat a meal. So if I tell myself I can't, now I'm just hungry and I'm angry. And that doesn't ever work good. That doesn't work out for me. So I don't make any
Yeah.
hard rules that I have to follow because I know that I'm going to need flexibility.
I love that. And I think that's a great way to approach nutrition, because I think a lot of us, when we are looking for the answers of how do I do this, we want to gravitate to those hard and fast rules, because it's like, okay, I can't mess this up because I have a rule. And if I follow this rule, it'll be okay. Except for that's not always possible, like you said.
Right.
And then we shame ourselves into like, I did it again. I failed once again.
Right, because every diet out there teaches you you have to follow the rules, and if you follow the rules, then you'll be successful. But anything less is a failure. We're not perfect. We're gonna screw up. I always tell people the screw up isn't the problem. Let's say you grabbed a cookie. You eating a cookie is not a big deal. You telling yourself, I ate a cookie, I shouldn't have done that, I'm a terrible person, I'm never going to lose weight, I can never be disciplined, this is so terrible, and then proceeding to eat a whole sleeve of cookies. That's the problem, not the one cookie that you consume. And so much of nutrition is changing your mindset. I had a gentleman who was looking to lose weight, and he said to me, well, I always clean my plate because I feel like it's respectful to the person who made the meal. And so I just asked him, like, well, how does that show respect? And he was like, I don't know. I just always thought that. I was like, well, what would it look like to show your self respect in that moment and show the person respect? And all of a sudden he's like, huh, I got to think about that. So much of nutrition for adults, especially, it's unlearning. Like you said, some of your habits and patterns were developed when you were 9 and 10 years old and going on diets. And so you learned something in that moment, you held on to it as if it was truth, and then you've developed a whole set of rules based off of those truths that you came up with as a younger child. So much of adult nutrition education is unlearning those things that we assume to be true and sometimes just need to be challenged. Like, well, how do you want to feel about this? What if we thought about it in a different way? Because our thoughts are what create our feelings create our behaviors, and our behaviors create our outcomes. It all originates with our thoughts. So if you don't like your outcome, then most times, more times than not, it's because you've created a thought that's not helpful or kind or true. And so they need to be challenged so that we can think differently, so we can do differently and have different outcomes. I hope that made sense.
It did make sense. And you touched on so many things. I'm like, I feel like you're in my head again, because I think for those of us who were chronic dieters like myself, and I can only speak for me, but I'm going to assume that it's a general thing, food becomes the enemy. It's like, I don't want to eat because I know the path that it's going to take me, and it's always bad. I think being able to shift your mindset around that would be huge. Is there anything that we can do to shift our mindset around that?
Well, a simple one is just no longer allowing yourself to categorize foods as good or bad. Remember that book that came out years ago, Eat This, Not That? This is good, this is bad. And that's not true. Food is not bad. What is good for one person may not be good for another. So it's not fair to categorize foods when different foods mean different things to different people. Again, there's no one size fits all with this. Problem with categorizing foods as good or bad is we inherently categorize ourselves as good or bad based on what we ate. I mean, how many times have you heard someone say, oh, I was so bad today? Right? We know exactly what they mean. Ooh, what did you eat?
Yeah.
Right? And when you assign a moral value to yourself, like I was bad today, how does that make you feel? Lousy.
Yeah.
Right?
And it usually leads to a lot more eating.
Yes, because now you need comfort because you basically just shamed yourself and blamed yourself and guilted yourself, which we all think, oh, it's going to motivate me. I would just look at myself in the mirror and point out all my flaws and all my fat and how terrible I am, and that's going to motivate me to do better. Really? All it does is make us feel horrible, and then we go eat because that's our coping strategy. So something as simple as not categorizing food as good or bad has such a tremendous ripple effect. Just that one little change in thought is massive. And a lot of people will ask me, okay, well, how do I do that? How do I not categorize food as good or bad? Well, number one is your thoughts. So if I can't eat that, that's bad. It's literally, nope, I'm not allowed to think that way anymore. Food is not good or bad. It's just food. And every time you have the thought, oh, I'm being good today. No, I am not good based off of what I eat. It's retraining your brain how to think about something.
Right. And that kind of goes back to the car analogy.
Yeah. If you say the words, oh, I was so bad. If you hear yourself saying it to somebody, no, sorry, I got to take that back. That's not true. And fix your sentence. That's how you change your mindset. It's by correcting yourself in the moment and giving your brain a new direction and repetition. And then you're going to get cocky and you're going to think you got it. Nope, that just means you need more practice.
Right. I think a lot of the times what I do when I'm trying to reset my mindset around something, because I can be really, really mean to myself, but I'm a nice person in general. So once I say something to myself, I'm like, ooh, would I say that to anybody else but me? And usually the answer is no.
Right. That's always a really good a checkpoint. Would I say this to a 4-year-old? If you wouldn't say it to a
Yeah.
4-year-old, then you shouldn't say it to yourself. And we think, oh, but it's just me. I can handle it. No, you can't. It's amazing how your whole mindset changes when you're kind to yourself. But we think it's
Yeah.
okay to belittle ourselves because we can handle it. Nope.
Someone once told me that your unconscious self is like a 5 or 7 year old child. It has no ability to reason. So talk to yourself like you would talk to a little kid. So that's a really good point. You were talking about proactive eating earlier instead of reactive eating. We started a little bit with the car analogy. So would it be helpful then to think about, instead of thinking about foods being good or bad, to think of them as fuel for the car? Some fuel is going to be better than others.
Yes. So, or you can think of things in terms of good, better, best. So, again, not good or bad, good, better, best. There's some that are going to be better for you, but it's very subjective. I always look at how does this make me feel? Do I notice I'm more energized or do I feel more lethargic? Does my stomach hurt when I eat these? And I start to look at which foods make me feel my best. Obviously, I want to eat them more because I like feeling good. Now, that doesn't mean I don't ever eat a cookie or, a dessert or anything like that because I also get enjoyment from those foods, but I pay attention to how it feels in my body and I try to eat the foods that are more consistent with how I want to feel.
I remembered something that you and I had talked about before, which was you have to eat your fuelings, not your feelings, because that's something that I struggle with. It's like food is just food, Veronica. It's not happiness.
Right. Well, and that's a really good question is like identifying physical hunger. Like, what does physical hunger feel like? Because physical hunger can be a stomach growl, a nauseous pit in your stomach, feeling of lightheaded, dizzy, irritable, angry, headache, shakiness, trouble concentrating. Like, those are all physical hunger signals. A lot of us are eating because we're emotionally hungry, angry, agitated, anxious, stressed, tired, bored. A lot of times, emotional hunger will present itself as a rattling in your chest, where physical hunger is more in your stomach area. But a lot of us mistake the two because they're so closely located to each other. A lot of times, when you're like, oh, I need chocolate, well, question number one is, are you hungry? So you identify what your physical hunger cue is and you look for it. And if it's there, then yes, you're going to eat. And if it's not, then you got to really figure out what is my body trying to tell me right now? What does it need? For some of us, it's rest. For some of it's a break from ourselves, from how mean we are to ourselves. For some of us, it's just, deep breathing. I just need to breathe right now. I'm all worked up. I just need to calm down. I really think it's important. I did this exercise with my daughter one time. I didn't realize I was doing it in the moment, but we were walking to the bus stop and she was 7. And we get to the bus stop, which is literally walking down my driveway and walking a few steps forward. And she says to me, I'm bored. I was like, what? How can you be bored? We just got to the bus stop. We didn't even stand out here for any length of time. And then I had this light bulb moment where I was like, Bella, what does boredom feel like in your body? So she looks down at her body because that's what a 7-year-old would do when you ask that question. And she's like, it
Right.
feels tired. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. How else does boredom feel in your body? She looks down and she says, it feels lazy. I said, that's a really interesting way to describe it. I said, when I'm bored, I get kind of antsy. Like my body wants to move. My mind is struggling to concentrate on one thing. I was like, honestly, I think you're describing fatigue. I think you're just tired. But she's 7. Could she be not using the right language? Sure.
Right.
Or that's how boredom feels in her body. I don't live in her body. I don't know. But the whole point was, if I can get her to understand how her body communicates different emotions, maybe she won't become a 40-year-old trying to eat her way through them.
Wow. I'm going to start doing that because I think that's absolutely true. And I've caught myself. I don't know if any of our listeners can relate, but I've been there, like, even eating healthy foods, like angry crunching a carrot, like, like I totally eating my feelings because I'm so mad and I'm trying to be healthy. So there's the carrot and I'm crunching away. So asking myself, like, what is this feeling actually in my body? Am I really hungry? I think it's going to be huge.
It's just a pause point. Is this really what I want to do? And the better we are at identifying our hunger cues. I mean, honestly, the reason why people gain weight, if you want me to break it down, I like to break things down really simply. We're either eating when we're not hungry or we're overeating past fullness. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. We're either eating when we're not hungry or we're overeating past fullness. And for a lot of us, it's a combination of the two. Learning what your physical hunger signals are is so important, because if you're not physically hungry, then how can we best serve the problem? Because eating isn't the solution if hunger isn't the problem.
Wow. That's another one I was like, wow, it's going to rattle around in my brain because that's true. You can't solve a problem with a solution that doesn't fit, but we try all the time.
Well, and how you know it doesn't fit is how you feel after. So if you feel worse after a coping strategy than better, it's not an effective coping strategy. When we eat when we're not hungry because we're angry, we often feel guilty, mad at ourselves, we're frustrated, we're sad. So it didn't work. It didn't make us feel better. It actually made us feel worse. Therefore, it wasn't an effective strategy.
Yeah. In the moment, it felt kind of nice.
Right.
Is there anything that you think might be useful for our audience in this upcoming year?
I like when people make health goals. Of course I do, because I want to always support that. But I think it's maybe going about it a little differently. If you're serious about weight loss, invest in a journal from the dollar store. It's probably the best thing that you can invest in, which sounds really silly because we're willing to hand over all this money to professionals or personal trainers or whatever to get us into shape. But unless we change our mindset and how we think about food, it's never going to stick. Whatever gets us there keeps us there. And so we have to figure out, how do I want to think about this for now and in the future? And asking yourself these really hard questions that we never really put much focus and attention on, because we don't. We're just like, that journal work, that's too much work. That feels like too hard. Yeah. But guess what? It can actually make a difference. And then you don't have to make the same resolution year after year after year. How many times have you made weight loss a resolution?
How old am I? The last 32 years.
Right? Wouldn't it be great to not have weight loss be a resolution and actually focus on something that brought you joy and you could put all your creativity and energy into?
Definitely. Because even as you said that, like, I got lighter.
Yeah. So that's part of it. I want to help people, but I don't want them to have to stay with me. Like, if they're staying with me 10 years from now because they still haven't figured it out, I didn't do my job.
Good point. Now, when we're talking about people connecting with you, you mentioned that insurance covers a lot of what you do. Is that something that you could do virtually, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as a dietitian, I'm licensed. So, I'm in the state of Pennsylvania. So, it really depends on your state licensure laws if I can see you virtually or not. So, some states have a very open hand policy that you can go to anybody in the country and use your health insurance. And some are restricted to, nope, this is my state and I have to see only dietitians in my state. If that's something that you have specific questions, I'd be happy to look it up for anybody that's interested and see if that would work. I do have a couple different programs on our website that anybody can go into at any point. There's one called Diet Rehab. So it's for people that are professional dieters. And it's a 30-day mindset program where you actually download a journal with journal prompts in it, and you get a video every day for 30 days. You have lifetime access to it. So don't worry if you miss a day, you have the videos for life. And you just watch a 4 to 5 minute video every day about a topic, and then you journal about it. And it really helps change that mindset of, how do I want to think about this? Like that good or bad food. That was one of the examples I gave you earlier. You may find that some of the journal prompts you're good with. You're like, yeah, I got this. I'm happy with how I think about it. And you can move on to the next. Others, you may need to spend a week on just one journal prompt. But I just want to get people thinking differently about what this could look like for them in terms of longevity, in terms of overall health. And so anybody can do that. It's a self-study course and it's very inexpensive. So I wanted to make it accessible to as many people as possible.
Perfect. Where can people connect with you and find that course?
So that's on our website, which is bodymetricshealth.com. And then all our socials are the same, Body Metrics Health, Instagram, Facebook, all the above. And then I also have a podcast as well. So if people want to listen to more about nutrition and health and kind of our approach to things, that is called Nourish, Eat, Repeat.
I love it. That's a great name.
It's named after my book. So in 2019, I wrote a book called Nourish, Eat, Repeat. So I didn't mention to you at the beginning of the show, I have 5 kids and it's all crazy. Now they range from ages 10 to 16. But I basically share stories of the chaotic moments of raising a big family and some of my own insecurities along the way into very short, easy to read chapters, almost like a chicken soup for the soul. You can pick it up, read any chapter, set it down. But it's basically stories that we can all relate to. And I take those stories and I connect them to nutrition lessons. And then at the end of each chapter, I have what I call 2 5-star recipes because 5 out of 5 kids will eat it. And so when we're looking for recipes and
yeah, that sounds great actually, because I need those in my life. My kids are so picky.
Exactly. Yeah, if you can get 5 kids to eat a meal, you know you're good because you're guaranteed somebody hates what you make.
Isn't that the truth? Every time I get one that like everybody likes, I'm like,
we're eating this every week.
I know. It's a miracle. And then inevitably somebody changes their mind about whether or not they like it.
Absolutely. It's a constant process.
Exactly. One of the things that I heard about coming into this new 2022 is new year, new you. And while I love the fact that people are transforming their lives, I think a lot of us already have everything that we need. We just need to find the best version of ourselves. So I think your approach to nutrition and eating correctly, or how am I going to say that without sounding bad?
Just eating best for their bodies.
There you go.
You actually bring up a really good point because I think that's another mindset shift that we need to make. It's like, I need to do everything different. I need a new meal plan. I need a new workout plan. I need a new schedule. And we don't give ourselves enough credit for all the good things we're already doing. We don't need to start all over. That feels hopeful in the beginning, like, oh, I'm going to get this whole brand new plan and I'm going to completely transform myself. But it's also very overwhelming when we still have all the day-to-day things that have to get done.
Right.
I like to always start with, what are you already doing well? Let's first celebrate those things and recognize those things and realize we don't need a complete transformation. We just need to make a few tweaks along the way. And ultimately, that is your transformation. Starting from a what is going well versus what is wrong with you.
You're right. It does sound exciting, and then it very quickly gets overwhelming when you're trying to redo your whole life while also living life.
Well, and that's another thing. I heard one time there's this difference between present self and future self. Right now, everybody's like, oh, come January 1st, I'm going to be all in. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to meal plan and meal prep, and it's going to be amazing. Where present self, has to deal with the day-to-day grind of just getting things done. They got the kids to chauffeur and feed and your work and your boss yelling at you and your car breaking down. Like present day self has to deal with all this stuff. But future self, oh, she's a rock star. She's going to do all the things and it's going to be amazing. And in our head, that's what we really think is going to happen. Except once we get to the future, we realize we're still stuck with present day self. So we have to be careful we don't make these big grandiose goals that will never happen based off of what our current lifestyle looks like. It's great to have hope. I love hope. It's motivation. But if that hope doesn't stay and that motivation doesn't stay, you're just left with the same mundane schedule that you've always had, and it's easy to quit. So I think that part's really important to notice that, yeah, I always think I'm going to do amazing stuff come January 1st. And you will. And I'll be your biggest cheerleader. But I also want you to do amazing stuff on January 17th and February 3rd.
Right. Let me see if I can recap everything because there were so many great kernels of wisdom within this conversation. So come January 1st, when we're ready to be our new selves or the best version of ourselves, as I'd rather consider it, the very best thing that we can do is acknowledge all the things that we're doing right. And as we do that, come up with minor tweaks that we can start changing in the day to day so that our present self can catch up to our future self, so to speak. And as we choose those things to do, is looking at what works best for us. So maybe keeping a journal and seeing how we feel and make sure we're eating our feelings, not our feelings. What else? Oh, proactive eating. Make sure that you're eating to sustain your levels of energy, not eating in reaction to the sugar crash or the I'm starving at the end of the night.
Yeah. And then also identifying physical hunger versus emotional hunger.
Yeah, that's a good one too. So many things that we can take into consideration. And audience, if you're out there going, oh my gosh, that's still a lot, like Adrianne said, take it one piece at a time. Build on that instead of taking everything on at the same time and then you feel like crud when it doesn't work out.
Exactly. Yeah. We talked about so many things. I would never tell one of my clients to do all these things right away. I just like to give a lot of information because I think it's important to give a lot of value. But you take one thing from this podcast and you just do that. And when you're ready, you listen to it again and then you take another thing.
That's a really good point. Because yeah, it does become very overwhelming. I know because I've been there and I'm like, oh, I can't do this. All right, give up. Adrianne, I want to thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot and I know our listeners did too.
Of course. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll be back to wrap up the show right after this. So what did you guys think of the interview? Because usually when you start a diet, it's very much about those hard and fast rules. And Adrianne was a little bit different. It was more about what is best for you, which I think is going to be the best approach because we're all different. And what works for one person isn't going to work for another. So if you got something from this episode, I would love it if you would share it with a friend or a colleague or a family member, anyone who you might think might benefit from it. I would also love it if you could leave me a review or send me a message. Let me know what tips, tricks, tools, and strategies are working for you because I always love getting those kind of messages. Tune in next week for another New Year BU special so that we can conquer 2022 together. Join the community, go to thebizessentials.com, sign up for our newsletter so that you can make 2022 your best year yet.
You've been listening to the Biz Essentials. Thanks for listening to the show. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information, learning how to be productive, be successful, be joyful, and more importantly, be yourself, and turning your dreams into successful passion projects. By listening to this show, you've already set into motion the most important part, starting. So it's important to catch the next episode. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. In the meantime, hook up with us on social media at Veronika Ventures and at the Biz Essentials. Till next time, this is the Biz Essentials.
Today's quote of the day is by Robert Urich. He once said, "A healthy outside begins with a healthy inside."